Howdy ho, friends and foes, and welcome to Dads on Life, your weekly episodic show about parenting from a male perspective. I'm your host, Jay Miles, and with me, as always, are my co-host, Keith Bogan.
Good morning.
Doug Hemmenike.
Good morning.
And Chad Holloway.
Good morning, guys.
Today, we're going to be talking about different things in pop culture through the years, as from when we grew up and into now, and how we introduce things, how we talk about certain things that have gone on in pop culture, and how we kind of deal with the stuff that is popular now with our kids. And some of it, honestly, I mean, if we'll get into, today later on. But I mean, upcoming in the next couple of weeks will be the release of the second Space Jam, which is basically, I guess, a continuation. I wouldn't call it a reboot, since there was only one movie anyway in the first place, of the original Space Jam, the Warner Brothers movie with all the cartoon characters with Michael Jordan, among other basketball players. This one is going to star LeBron James. It's caught its share of flack for the whole Pepe Le Pew thing, and then there was the trying to get to boycott the movie and have HBO cancel the movie in the first place because of LeBron's comments about police brutality. But there's a ton of stuff that you can cover in pop culture and things like that. But for this one, in this case, Space Jam for me came out probably right after my senior year of high school. And I watched the movie, and, now it's kind of like my daughter now oldest daughter wants to see the original one and then see the sequel. So how do you guys deal, Keith? I mean, we know your views on certain parts of pop culture. I think we all know and can quote Bible and verse your feelings on Grand Theft Auto.
You're cracking me up here, because as you were talking, I'm thinking to myself, I don't even associate the expression pop culture with things like Space Jam. To me, now I have kids who are older, and Space Jam is somewhat of an animated movie aimed at a much younger audience, I think, at least. Although it seems to have attracted the attention of other people. But you were saying, Jason?
When you're using, usually yes, but when you're using NBA stars, you're definitely broadening your horizons, because yes, kids watch the NBA, but let's be honest, the majority of NBA fans are probably ages, I would say the majority are probably 16 to 50, really.
I would certainly agree with that, hence why it does capture the attention of some other people. But as you were saying, something that will be released later this month, and you hadn't said Space Jam yet, even though we talked about it before we started recording, I thought to myself, yep, here comes Fast and Furious 9 on June 25th. And in this household, that's what we're paying attention to. We're much more interested in that and the upcoming additions to things like Star Wars and to Avatar and there's other Oh, goodness. I'm trying to remember. I mean, this summer's obviously going to be full of a slew of really cool movies. Um, some
Believe
of
me,
which should not be rebooted.
this actually is a good year to have things like HBO Max existing and having them releasing the movies at home, especially with the reboot of Dune, which is apparently going to be actually really good coming up. So
Yeah, I got to go watch the first one. But it's very interesting. It's such a great topic for what we're talking about in this podcast over time, because what you view as pop culture and what is viewed as pop culture in my house are just completely different. And I imagine, Doug might be able to relate a little bit more to what you're hearing, Jason, whereas Chad might be able to relate a little bit more to me. It's just an age thing, and not so much our ages, but the ages of the kids.
well, not necessarily true, but
Well, I will give it to you, Jason, that your view of culture in general is much broader than mine. I just don't pay much attention in general. But I, there are certain movies and certain entertainment things that just resonate over time. Um, I don't even typically use the term pop culture. Um, maybe I'm not even sure what the real definition of it is. Just things that endure through time, if you will. Cult classics is probably my expression. I think of things like Blazing Saddles and what have you, and Jaws and what have you.
well,
Those
those they're
well, Keith.
See,
they're
see
not
the age
cult
is kicking in
classic. Those
there.
are Blazing Saddles is not a cult classic. It is
Okay, you
not a
need to
cult
get off
movie.
our podcast right now, because if you don't think that, and just remember, if you edit it for content, it's a 7-minute movie, but it's a really, really good movie. And it's a cult classic for sure. Absolutely.
Well, cult that's more like Clockwork Orange, not really Blazing Saddles. Blazing Saddles was a very, very popular movie. He made a shit ton of money off of that movie. So it was pop culture in the 1970s.
To me, yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying, but to me, anything where you can quote the lines from it on a regular basis 50 years later, that's a cult classic.
Okay. So
Hi, Elvis.
what okay. So you mentioned Fast and the Furious. I will say that because of certain stars that were in that movie, and I would say I didn't have to drag her kicking and screaming. I took Delana to see Fast and the Furious Hobbs and Shaw.
That's pretty bold considering how violent the movie is.
She had seen the Marvel movies already, so it kind of really isn't that much of a stretch.
It's true.
And I believe it was, she was just getting into wrestling, really. And if you know anything about the series, you know that it's The Rock. And in Hobbs and Shaw's case, one of his family members in the movie was his cousin, Roman Reigns, who is also one of the very popular wrestlers right now. And I mean, even in pop culture now is The Rock himself with his TV show, Young Rock. So and it's funny because that's a Young Rock is a good point to bring up when you're talking about pop culture through the generations. Because when you look at at Young Rock and what it's about, obviously it's about his family, his upbringing, but one of wrestling has had its run of time, and the biggest, probably the most well-known family in it is the Rock's family. So that you know, that is one thing that some of the stories they touch on in that, while tame, there's a couple of things in there that you kind of go, wow, I forgot that happened. So it's a little hard to explain things like that sometimes. But so now we have classic films from you which have been brought up. How did you go about address? Well, yeah, you brought up Blazing Saddle. Let's go to that one especially, because like you said, if you edit it for content, it's a 7-minute movie. And nowadays, how would you guys go about addressing something like that, a film like that?
You know, it's interesting because actually my boys have never seen that particular movie. But let's go back in time, and this is how generations finally have changed a bit, and it's all about social media. When I was a kid, my parents never had the talk with me. I never heard about the birds and bees because I heard about it from my 3 older brothers. But there were people in my family who kind of walked me through it, albeit a bit bizarrely because it was three older boys instead of the parents. But I've never had that conversation with my sons, and I don't think I need to, because society has so much more information flowing around that they readily learn about this stuff in grade school, but even before high school, very easily. So what I'm getting at is, and the same thing is true with movies. Like, I really wanted Justin to see things like Animal House before he went to college. Turned out he did it all on his own. I keep hearing, "Oh man, dude, I really want to get to see this movie with you." And he's like, "Dad, I already saw it. Dad, I already saw it." Dad, and because society is, there's so much access to information and to entertainment, that they're picking this stuff all up on their own. When we were kids, we sort of relied on our parents or our siblings to introduce us to this stuff. So it is very different, I think. I wanted, there's like, in this family, baseball is just everything. We just live for baseball. So I wanted to see Field of Dreams with Justin. Now that's one he hasn't seen yet, but I don't know if I'm ever going to get to see it with him before he sees it with somebody else. You know, just the access is crazy. By the way, in this house, Field of Dreams is pop culture. It's like it's mandatory viewing, and you know, sometime this summer, if he hasn't seen it yet, he's seeing that movie, and then so will Jeremy.
My brother-in-law and I went to see it 2 years ago at they did a anniversary re-release of it, so we went and saw that it was that and Glory, I think we saw.
There is nothing, by the way, for anybody who's ever put on a baseball glove, there's nothing like going to that field and throwing a ball with your son. If you haven't done it,
You've done that?
yes, I have.
Nice.
Yeah.
Super nice.
Yeah.
The Yankees are playing there this year, I think, aren't they?
They were supposed to last year, and I think it is rescheduled for this year.
Because this year they're playing there.
They've now wildly commercialized the field. It really, I mean, when we got there, it was a Sunday morning and nobody was there. We were all alone when we did our thing. So I don't think you can do that anymore.
You mentioning Blazing Saddles. I think the first time I saw that, I know where it was. I was went to my friend's house, and we watched it with his father, I believe. I think I was maybe 11, probably, when I saw Blazing Saddles for the first time. But I had seen, probably a pretty decent amount of movies by then that would Like I know I'd seen RoboCop. My parents had taken me to see, I think Lethal Weapon 2. So Blazing Saddles kind of was, it was a little bit, of a shell shock at first, but it now I don't I just honestly at this point, Delana I think would get it. And Delana, I think, would probably think it was funny. Sadie wouldn't get it. She's 7. She's not. There's a lot of the stuff in there. She's not going to get things like that. She wouldn't get the humor in a lot of the 70s comedies, more or less. But Elise and I were just discussing going back, something even further. And I think, and I've come to the conclusion that it would bore the shit out of them. Would be something like Casablanca. I think that would bore the shit out of my kids.
And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why it would bore the shit out of them. It's not about the content of the movie. It's about the physical techniques of how they filmed it. And this is what I bitch about all the time. In the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, camera angles stayed steady for 10, 15, 20 seconds of a shot. Now,
jump cut, a lot of jump cuts. Yeah,
you don't even get 3 seconds now. They have to cut so quickly because it's the only way to maintain attention with the short attention span of society. And I'm not talking about ADD or ADHD. I'm talking about Hollywood has trained the world to have a much shorter attention span by cutting much more quickly, by moving much more quickly, by presenting new visions much more quickly, literally every 2-3 seconds. So but something like Casablanca or any of the old Gone with the Wind or anything like that would bore the hell out of most kids because it just doesn't, it's not action the way we look at action. And they're not interested much in storylines anymore. So, it's much more about things that blow up and explode on things, what have you. It's a little pessimistic, but the whole camera angle thing, Hollywood has created an entire series of generations, not just the current one, but several before that, of kids who don't know how to focus.
I agree with that. It's interesting you talk about that because my wife was putting together a video first to share on social media of one of our vacations, and so she had part of it where like somebody was doing something for like 5 seconds, and I go, oh, that's way too long. I go, the videos, if you look at videos now, like literally you count and it's like 2 seconds and it shows another snippet of something else. It's like 1, 2, other video, 1, 2, other video. And it just, and it's true. It's just because, and even for me, I'm trained like that at this point. Like, I don't want to sit and watch something for 10 seconds. It has to be a documentary or so I have to be in that mood. But if it's something that's fast moving, it needs to move fast.
Right.
So I totally see that now. And the other comments I like to make is, a couple more kind of catch up a little bit is, with regard to what Keith said about the talk. Growing up, I really didn't have the talk. My uncle had me and my cousin, we spent a lot of time on the farms. We saw the animals and those kinds of things. But my uncle one day had us in the truck and he's like, all right, boys, when a man loves a woman, he inserts his erect penis into the woman's vagina and spermatozoa. I mean, it was totally the scientific. I'm like, well, that was a great lesson in science,
Yeah.
And he was trying to do his duty, right, for us and teach us. And he did. From the science perspective, I understand it very well now based on what he had said to us. But in my career, and I remember I was actually questioning my mom about that, and so there was a movie and they were talking about sex, and I said, and I had walked in on it, and I looked at my mom and I go, what do they mean? That's probably, I don't know, 8, 9, 10. And I walked in, I said, Mom, I said, they're talking about sex. But I go, what is sex? And my mom looked at me and she had this really kind of flabbergasted look on her face. She goes, I don't know. I guess it means boy or girl, whether they're a boy or girl. So that was my talk with my mom, right? So later on, I went to the University of Miami and we did a lot of it's kind of at the beginning of the HIV and AIDS crisis. So we were doing a lot of education and program evaluation. So one of the things we did at that point was, educating with gay men's health crisis, and also we had some education that was implemented in the Dade County public school system, which that was a whole different thing because it was very conservative Catholic school system, more or less, but we had gotten some things implemented. So my perspective on it is it's a lifelong process. So I had conversations with my son from the time he was 3 about there's differences between boys and girls. And here's what those differences are, but not too much. It was all age appropriate. So over time, I've had a lot of small conversations with him that kind of leads him to a better understanding of it. And probably when he was in high school, I'm going to guess probably a freshman or sophomore, we had the conversation about the sex piece of it, right? And I said, hey, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, it's really fun. I'm not going to say don't do it. You're not going to enjoy it. I was very honest. I said, you'll love it, but there are consequences, and you have to keep these consequences in mind. You can have pregnancies, diseases, and keep in mind that you might be with some girl whose dad gets upset, and I can't come defend you in that situation. You're going to have to deal with some girl's dad if he finds out you've been doing this, and it won't be pretty. So you need to consider these things as you're making your decisions in your life about what you need to do. So we had conversations all along, but if you look at kind of that versus the pop culture piece of it, because I want to say in general, growing up, we had a pretty tame Keith and I in our generation had pretty tame movies. I think more or less, we might have had Saturday Night Fever, I think was one that was kind of racy at the time, but that's nothing now. You look at I can't remember the artist's name, but we've got WAP that's out there, and has those videos, and they are pretty blunt about what they're saying and what's on their mind. So sexuality over time has really changed significantly, and it's become much more front and center, and it's in your face. So I guess I'm glad that Frankie grew up when he did, from my perspective. And I mean, he's kind of on the tail end of that, I guess, as well. But Jason, having a couple girls that and you have that song that's out there, that's a tough one, I think, especially for a father of girls.
To an extent, yes, but it's been a topic and a subject that put itself into Hollywood's conscience almost 30 years ago, actually.
Mm-hmm.
First time I would say it really did was Fatal Attraction. And then the second time it did, Basic Instinct came out a long time ago, if you think about it. It was 1991, 92, something like that. So maybe 95, but that's still 30 years ago. So yeah, that I mean, it's been in Hollywood's conscience and the pop culture conscience for quite a while now. I like I said, I'm going to say Fatal Attraction is probably the first time, and that was 87. So yeah, but to think about it, the gap between that and Grease and Saturday Night Fever and things like that is probably 10 years, maybe 10 years. Because I'm trying to think if maybe it goes back a little further even than. Oh, true. There was one of those movies with Mickey Rourke, if I remember correctly. That was like 85.
9 months or something like that.
Nine and a half weeks. 9.5 weeks. Yeah, that was like 85. So. Okay. And that's even closer to, Saturday Night Fever. And what was the second one? The second one came out in 82.
Okay.
83, something like that. 80, whatever the second movie was. I forgot what it was. But that was really campy, the second one. It was much more camp to that one.
And maybe some of it is the movies maybe have not. I think it's society's perception is what it's changed. Because I know at the time I was like, oh, you can't watch that, and it's something we're going to go see, the adults are going to go see this, but now it's like less of a big deal. We have, WAP winning some awards, and it's not important.
You could make that argument with music, but I would make the argument that that goes back in the 1950s, really. I mean, if you really listen, there's no sugarcoating of those lyrics in the 1950s of what they were talking about.
What is the gratuitousness like nowadays that it just, and the amount of it. I mean, like when you take on like even Megan Thee Stallion, like look at even at the top 10 songs. I mean,
Doug,
what?
do you remember Two Live Crew?
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
But we're not
30
talking about
30 years ago?
It wasn't winning awards. I mean, that was something that was,
Well, some of that stuff did. I mean, they were not sugarcoating it in the 80s hairband stuff either. And they were winning awards for it. That's for sure.
All right. Well, as we become more of adults, it's more of a turnoff as we become older, let's say.
More
And,
what?
I said for a lot of adults, as we become older, it becomes more of a turnoff, let's say. And I would say that even like if you take the top most popular shows on any of the cable networks, like Shameless and stuff, way over the top, super popular nowadays, stuff like that, when my parents were growing up. But also at the same time, it's somebody like my wife, she can't stomach to watch like a single episode of Shameless, And
And we've made our full circle back to Grand Theft Auto.
It's kind of well, Shameless is yeah, you're right.
But I mean, even like City on a Hill, love it. But the amount of sex, drugs, and everything else, and rocket-fueled alcoholism, is a turnoff to my wife nowadays. I mean, she used to watch everything alongside me, and most of those shows on Showtime or HBO, she can't she isn't interested, let's say.
I have a growing respect for your wife there, Doug.
Okay. What did she think of something like Sex and the City?
I don't think she's ever watched it, but I'm just saying that over time, she's become very much, has grown to not take akin to things that are overly hyped with, over the top, either drugs, alcohol, guns, cursing. But it is what it is. I just think that as we become older, a lot of us, maybe lose the sensationalism of that and aren't looking for that anymore, in our films. Not
Funny
saying
you
that-
mentioned that. Funny you
Or
mentioned
music.
Sex and the City. Jason, do you consider Sex and the City a pop culture reference? Because I look at Sex and the City compared to what they do today in the same types of offerings as a group of nuns in canvas bags.
Well, if you want to talk about getting in the is Sex and the City in pop culture's consciousness, most people had never even heard of a Cosmopolitan before Sex and the City came along.
I totally
So-
agree with you, but the world has changed dramatically, and
Yeah.
us old
It's-
folk, I don't think it's a good change.
That's why I brought up Sex and the City, because I mean at the time no, but now it's compared to Shameless, it is relatively tame. But to an extent, no. I mean, there has to be. Well, let's put it this way: in all these shows, there has to be a jumping off point. There has to be a starting point. Violence, be it sex, be it drugs and rock and roll, whatever, drugs and alcohol. There's a jumping off point. If you go back and look in a lot of them, there's a major jumping off point. I'll tell you, we were talking about the Marvel movies. If you look at the Marvel movies, there's a ton of that and reference to that in those movies, especially besides from the violence, the alcohol. There's a lot of it, and there's a lot of the character defects. That's one of the big things that's involved.
That's why the
alcohol
series
and
is so popular, because they're all flawed.
yes, but
I was serious when I said a moment ago, and we've made full circle back to Grand Theft Auto, because the whole topic here to me about pop culture is, what do we feel comfortable introducing our kids to, and what have we avoided because we think it's just over the top or wrong or inappropriate or immoral or whatever. You know, for me, Grand Theft Auto was never and never will be something that is morally appropriate in around my family. Now, of course, they're 19 and 22 years old now. They can do whatever the hell they want, and I wouldn't stop them, but I would give them my thoughts on it. You know, I would be very, very vocal about my disapproval of them interacting with media like that. But that's just a video game. You know, there's like you guys talked about. By the way, I got to ask this question because I'm so out of it, and I don't even know. I'm not connected to society. I don't even know what WAP is. I've never heard of it before. So I'm sorry.
You're kidding me, right?
What are you talking about? But it doesn't sound good, whatever it is.
Linda,
Wet
cover
ass.
Linda, cover your ears. It's wet ass pussy.
Oh,
Yeah, it's wet ass pussy. Elise is shaking her head saying she didn't know it either. So
oh man, our ratings just went up enormously. Tell me more.
yeah, that's on. But if let's get right into that one, and I'm just gonna say it for the sake of saying it. The song sucks anyway. Besides from
There's a
it just being the raunch factor, it's written purely for the raunch factor and recorded purely for the raunch factor. It is just a horrible song to begin with. It just, as soon as I heard it, I'm just like, not even the lyrics, not even like listening to lyrics, because the first time I heard it, I was edited. Obviously, I knew what she was saying, but the song is just dumb. But there is a lot of stuff in today's society where I kind of roll my eyes and go, what? This is pointless. This is useless. Why is this? You know, it exists, obviously. Artistic merit, I understand that, but some of it just truly is garbage, and it's not because there's anything wrong with it.
I gotta stop you right there. Think about how often our parents rolled their eyes and thought.
Oh no, I totally agree.
So, is what they're experiencing now any different than what we experienced when we were kids?
Absolutely not.
Seems like it's, but we are our parents. There's no question about it. And in about 15, 20 years or less, our kids will be us. It's the same cycle all over again, and it will never stop. I'm just terrified of what our kids will be.
I think Doug has a point of he ain't Big Linda.
Oh no, I just mean that I agree with Keith's idea of the circle. But my thing is that I think that kids our days are just more heavily saturated with all this. You know, whether everywhere you go, I mean, you can't even go to a supermarket, you know. So yeah, I just think the saturation is a lot heavier on the kids today.
Which is why I'm terrified when I think about what our kids will be experiencing. I know how our kids will react to that, 20, 25 years from now, because we're watching ourselves now. They'll react the same way. But I am truly terrified about the next couple of generations after that and what they're going to be seeing. I mean, at the speed that things have really seemed to unfold and become much more liberal. And I'm a pretty liberal guy. I'm a progressive guy, as it will. When we talk about social issues or politics. But man, I'm beginning to spin and get very, disgusted by some of the stuff I see.
Well, there's there's one thing I will say, I will bring up that we talk about in pop culture is one event, well, one of the major events a year that tries to present a heavily enveloped part of pop culture in its, let's say, its halftime show for all intent and purposes. And that's, we can't even say it actually, the big game that is played in February every year. The big football game that is played in February every year, because you know what you can't say. But like over the years, that has taken its share of flack. There's been its share of moments that have been controversial. I don't think there's any denying that. And I will say in this case that in the most recent one with the halftime performance this year, I thought it was kind of lackluster. So I thought The Weeknd was, it was very bland. His music's a little bit difficult to enjoy, but there are a couple of songs that I like from him. But I would say it's been a good couple of years where there's been some just okay performances in pop culture. Now, the interesting one 2 years ago that they brought in two people who have had a long run, considering the fact of they've been on pop music's conscience for the better part of, in J-Lo's case, almost 30 years now, and Shakira, who's going on almost 30 years herself. So that has gone through its change, and it's interesting to see some of the performances and be able to gauge them against some of the classic performances. One of the more recent classic performances, two of them, I would say, that I would bring up as a good point of being able to keep your finger on pulse of pop culture, would be Bruno Mars from when he performed at Giant Stadium.
Super.
And Lady Gaga would be another one that I think is a good example of how a halftime performance should be done. Bruno, now getting to him, Bruno disappeared for a bit, but has now been working on something and released it a couple of months ago. He released a new album, or is coming up, that is, he's been somebody who's kind of obviously gone back into certain eras to record stuff. This one, the Silk Sonic recording being one of them. And that has heavy influences of the 1970s, even to the video for the first song that was shot. It really is just like a 70s soul R&B group performing, like they're all dancing in sync, and it's just the players are dancing in sync, moving their heads, dancing around.
Mark
And
Ronson,
that,
man.
what's that?
Mark Ronson.
No, that actually, Mark Ronson didn't have anything to do with that album. That was just him and the drummer, pretty much. It's Bruno and the drummer. Mark Ronson has nothing to do with it. The musician who kind of came out of the woodwork to help with that was Bootsy Collins from P-Funk.
Yeah, I saw that.
But yeah, Mark Ronson is one of those ones that Bruno Mars owes a lot of his career to, that's for sure. But
Well, he has that whole sound that he's been doing for for a long time. A lot of people he's created that sound with. But yeah, anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
But it's interesting how it seems like the things that do well in some cases are throwback type performances or type of films, not remakes or reboots, so to speak, but stylistically familiar things like every couple of years that crime drama will come out that is clearly rehashed Maltese Falcon type of stuff, and then Mulholland Drive and all that in that line of things.
And Jason, to that point about bringing things from the past into the present, if we think about children's movies, I think when Keith and I were growing up, and probably when you guys were growing up too, for the parents to take the kids to the movies, if it's a children's movie, it's just like, oh, I got to sit through this, but I'm going to do it for my kid. It's, they'll enjoy it, but the parents really didn't. But now if you look at what we have with like the Shrek movies are the ones that come to mind for me, there are cultural references for adults as well. So you've got the Immigrant Song, for example, and one of them, you've got things that the adults agree with. And so the children are laughing, but also there are parts in there where the adults are laughing too. So they really made taking these children movies and putting little bits and pieces in there that the adults can enjoy as well. So I think that's why they're so much more popular at this point.
Well, Pixar is good at that too. Pixar and Disney have become good at that now. Actually, there's one that I actually saw, and it was in the commercial for the movie. In the movie Secret Life of Pets, there's a scene where they play a song from. I can't believe I'm about to say this because I'm not sure Disney was aware of what the song was about. The song "Jump" from System of a Down, which is a song about sex. He's talking about jumping up and down on a pogo stick. He's talking about an orgy essentially in the song. The song "Jump," yeah, look it up. If you listen to it, it's quite evident what the song is about. So it was very interesting to hear that song chosen by Disney for a commercial, no less, for one of their movies. And I would say that there's been some questionable things that Disney has done. I would go as far as to say in some of their cartoons, you kind of look at it now as we get older and go, wait a minute. Well, let's put it this way. When John Smith arrives to Pocahontas and first sees Pocahontas, if you remember, that was kind of racy. The way she's positioned herself when she meets John.
Mm-hmm.
So to speak. Yes. Anyway.
Ay. No pun intended.
Well.
But and I think another thing that we've seen change over time too, and Doug could probably speak to this much more than I can. But if you look at for example, horror movies, it seems like now we have in the movies they show what's going on. In the past, it seems like there was a lot more thought. And I remember I had a professor in college, and he said people are becoming lazy. He says because in the past we would read things and we think about what could happen, and in our minds it's much more scary than what somebody can show us on the screen. So for example, when you have a movie like The Shining, that really isn't a lot of gore, right? I mean, it's
Psycho.
It's scary though, right? Because you're like, what can happen? What's he going to do? What's Jack Nicholson going to do? In the scene, and there's a lot of things that go on in your mind, but it's not gruesome in any way. But today we have movies like Saw, and there is no thinking about what's going to happen. It's just blood and guts and gore and you know, to his point, you know, I think that those are, I don't like the really gory movies as much. I prefer the ones that are more like kind of build up and you're like, what's going to happen, you know, and you can kind of think about it much more than just showing it. So I think that's another way that the pop culture has changed quite a bit. And for younger children, like, I think that's more dangerous because they might just be like, oh, what's happening with this dad? The dad's upset, versus some guy cutting his own arm off. That's a little more distressing.
Well, we all know first off, we all know the big thing about what actually happens to what is really going on with Jack Torrance and in The Shining, and exactly what causes his decline. And that's you bring up a good point. Look at the iconic shower scene. You see nothing happen, really.
Right.
You barely see skin. You don't see anything happen at all, hardly. It's just implied, but it's well implied. In fact, I can't remember for the life of me if you even see a knife. I think you see a glance of it for a second, and that's about it. It may even be in shadow. I don't even know if you actually see it.
Yeah. Right.
If you go back to Jaws, I mentioned Jaws earlier. If you really think about it, you don't really see the violence in Jaws. You just see the red squirting liquid, and that's it. No, you don't see the stuff.
The first one, no. The second movie, I believe you start to see it, and then it really starts to go into it a little bit more.
I didn't go to the second one.
By the fourth one, you definitely see it. They're at least hanging out of their, the sharks' mouths and stuff like that. Yeah. Another one, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You don't see anybody. The only you see, that's one of the first ones where you see one of the characters hanging on the hooks, but you don't actually see anybody. It's a couple of movies later that you see somebody literally sawn, even when which I think was one of the more beautifully shot deaths of a movie is Franklin in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's just all implied and just really amazingly shot. And the shower scene, like I said, is another one. But yeah, that grew its conscience probably in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, where you kind of got into where you had with the release. What's that? Go ahead,
No,
Doug.
I was just going to say that, like horror, like Chad was saying, and how you're getting into, like when we think about the silent films and then coming through, into like a lot of the horror, like either satanic or whatever coming around, and that like lasted all the way up until like now you're saying when we start getting into like, the slasher, slashers even after that, but like you're saying, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, your Friday the 13th and stuff like that, Halloween, we're seeing more of the, growing like violent, more, slasher type films, which leads to now, which is just, you can't even call them horror films anymore. But I mean, yeah.
Well, the first one to getting into gore probably was what? It wasn't here. It wasn't a director in America, I don't believe. Probably was Dario Argento.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Or one of the guys in Japan, Kurosawa or something like that. That's my guess. Is it definitely was not somebody, an American director that did it.
They weren't widely
pressed
popular, but yeah.
It's
And I was
interesting,
gonna say, not showing you anything was a great example of that is The Fog, where an entire town is wiped out and never seen like any weapons or like blood.
Which one?
In that movie. The Fog.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, The Fog, and there's another one like that. Yeah, The Fog. Oh
Yeah.
God. Oh no, The Mist didn't come out until years later. They never made a movie of that.
Yeah.
so
but
do
The
you
Fog is
ever, because we always hear the term pop culture reference, and something like the shower scene, those three words, is a pop culture reference. But most of those references won't mean a thing to our kids unless we walk them through the entire movie and have them see it, or what the movie or the concert or whatever these references came from. You know, we ain't in Iowa anymore. There's just a ton of it. You can't handle the truth. To me, these are what you would call pop culture references. And how often do we use them in front of our kids and then have to explain what the hell we're talking about? That happens for me quite a bit.
Yeah, I remember the story, and this is just off topic for a second, which we've kind of been off topic the whole time. Is Janet Leigh couldn't shower. I remember her saying she couldn't shower for a very long time after that. I use them for sure. For sure, I use them. Certain ones that they kind of have picked up on, but some of them no.
You kind of can't until you see the reference. You know,
Yeah,
you have to
well,
see it
like
being done.
what Keith is saying, I mean, it's like one of those parenting moments that's great because if it's something that you enjoy, it really gives an opening for you to like share with your kids and or show them, you know. And yeah, there's like a lot of movie references that we've gone back and watched with Brendan now that he's a little bit older and understands better a lot of things and more interested in things with growing curiosity. And plus that we just like enjoy a lot of the older stuff. So he's also like more inquisitive into older movies and stuff like that. It's a great opportunity. But the one that I was thinking about actually was Metallica, Creeping Death, you know, and going back and showing him biblically with the video and the Ten Commandments movie, you know, and how deeply that song is rooted in you know, the Ten Commandments movie with Charlton Heston and all. It was a great time that we linked that movie, that reference back to the movie and watched the movie. It was a lot of fun.
You could have done it with the Mummy too, to an extent.
Yeah.
The recent Mummy, not the recent one, the original Mummy that was one with Brandon Fraser. That's another one that covers a lot of what he's talking about in that song.
Yeah.
And I mean, another good one. I know this is maybe a little, might be a little rough. A real good one to do that with would be to play them the song Metallica and then go watch Johnny's Got His Guns. It might be a little heavy, but I mean, it's not just reference. Obviously, the way that the video was shot had clips of the movie in there too. That's another one that would be really interesting to do that with. To an extent, I mean, you could even do that maybe with if you did Metallica one, you kind of could do that with it's not the same, but it's similar, would be Born on the 4th of July. The Tom Cruise movie. Obviously, it's not as much tie-in as Johnny's Got His Guns, because one is based on that. But there's similarities because of what happened, what happens to Tom Cruise in Tom Cruise's character in Born on the 4th of July.
In closing for me, back to the Blazing Saddles. Sorry, I just coming up against a deadline time. Blazing Saddles for me, would I let Brendan watch it? Yeah, sure. And just the idea of that it's more or less satire and how a lot of people, like, oh, well, All in the Family couldn't be played today and, and this and that. Well, we've lost that idea of comedy, satire, stuff like that. And, just that I think a lot of people take All in the Family in the wrong direction, thinking about what it was and all. They were like, like a lot of Republicans, oh, that would never fly. But really, when you think about what they were trying to portray in the show, hey, it could be a learning lesson. as well as it's just funny is funny, you know. I've let
Well,
my son. I sat down with him and I watched like Death Race 2000 with him already. I mean, James Carradine, Rocky Balboa, lots of stereotypes going on in there, lots of off-color racism, also surrounded in macho killing. But once again, it's very satirical, very like you have to laugh at it, when you see it. So all these things, taken cautiously. As to pop references and stuff, we use them. We try to educate our kids on them. My kids love the '80s, love a lot of older music and stuff. Colin will police himself. He'll turn off shows because of foul language. He'll even turn me and Heather in on like for using like foul language in the house. I mean, the kid is like a little mini terror sometimes with that. But Brendan, he loves pop culture and learning more. I mean, we learn from him as much as he learns from us. And it was just interesting the other day that actually I listen to a lot of still modern rock and indies and stuff. And Colin always jokes, "Oh, Daddy's listening to his indies again and stuff." But a song came on the other day, and Colin's like, "Oh, I like that song. I have it in my playlist." And I was like, "Really? Wow! I was not expecting that."
what
But
song was it?
uh, some space time song by Beach House. So, uh, but as pop culture references go, there's always stuff like this laying around, you know.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so I'm gonna start walking around and probably mute myself at this moment because it's gonna start getting busy here.
It's a Sunday morning. Any other thoughts, Chad, Jason?
No, one thing that just occurred to me a little bit, and it's a little late to mention. I'm a little tardy in it, but I still wanted to mention anyway, is that when we talk about like video games versus movies, one of the things, that as I sat here and thought about it, was one thing is that as a movie, those movies come at the children, and we can say, don't watch that movie, or they're doing this because. But when you have a game, it's more they're in the driver's seat and they're taking these actions, right? So they're actually making the decision to run over the prostitute or to fight somebody or something in the car. So, I was just thinking that there's some differences in that versus, kind of censoring and protecting the kids from one thing versus them playing the video games. They're very different.
Wholeheartedly agree.
In terms of the perspective of the viewer. But, I think, in certain respects, we've become our parents. And it's every generation is just kind of recurring. And so maybe what they're listening to now, we say that's a little racy, like our parents thought that about the things that we listen to and watch. And, I'm sure that the same thing, the cycle will continue with our children as well, but so goes society.
Keith, anything else to add before we wrap this up?
No, I think I've pontificated enough today. Good.
I was gonna say, besides from your railing on Grand Theft Auto,
I never do that now, do I? I have no idea what you're talking about.
how many times did you mention it and bring it back to that in the show? If we were playing the shot game, somebody'd probably be drunk by now.
Grand Theft Auto is going to send him games for life every time they have a new game. Thank you for promoting our game. My parents saying it's bad. What better publicity could we get?
Yeah, I'm just pumping up the ratings here. That's all I'm doing.
I think that's a pretty good place to leave us for the week. When it comes to what's popular now, as it does pertain to our kids, the fact of what is old is new again keeps coming around. I know to an extent, For me, I'm kind of happy that Deanna wants to see the original Space Jam first before we watch the other one. I'm hoping this is a trend. She's 10. And I'll put it this way, she is a fanatic of the Harry Potter movies as well.
Good choice.
So in my case, I'm hoping this is the beginning of a trend where she'll, on her own, with all the streaming services we have, and some of the older channels on things like satellite radio, knowing that she has access to that, will slowly start finding her way into some of the older materials from our generation and fill the gap into between where Elise and I were married but older. Obviously, I had no kids at the time, but that kind of stuff as well, because there's some good stuff in there. Like I said, it's the more people are willing to go back and look at older material, the more intrigued they are by it, the better understanding they will have of the past, and maybe be able to mold a better future for themselves. So, from all of us here at Dads on Life, take care, everybody.
Have a good one.
See you later.
Have a great week, guys.